Hey everyone, this is MusicTechHelpGuy, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can create your own beats just using loops and samples along with the quick sampler in Logic Pro 10. So I find this one of the quickest and easiest and most creative ways of using loops. Rather than just using a loop as is, you can slice up a loop into its individual pieces, layer it with other one-shots, and create your own custom beat that is indistinguishable from the original loop. So I'm going to find a couple loops here. I like to use Splice for loops and samples, but you can get these wherever you want. You can use the loop browser in Logic. I want a kick, a snare, maybe some sort of an effect, a hi-hat, and we'll go from there. We'll start there. Okay, so I like that snare. So I'm going to pull this in. And in Logic 10.5 and later, they introduced these sort of shortcuts for sampling. So I'm going to use Quick Sampler Original. And what this is going to do is it's going to recognize that this is a loop, and it's going to slice up the loop. So you'll notice it automatically puts it in slicing mode. So on D1 here, I have my snare. Also on E1, and so forth and so on. And then I've got this little extra noise in here. Probably not going to use that. Probably just going to use the snare. And let's find another instrument. I kind of like these hi-hats. Let me pull these in as well. Put this Quick Sampler Original. It's going to really chop this up because this is a long loop. I'm just going to sort of trim this up and zoom in here so I can see what's going on. So this is kind of cool. I've got some additional sounds here I can work with. Some snaps. If you want to get rid of these slices, it's as simple as double clicking. So now G1 will be that full little snap sample, or whatever that is, some sort of an effects sample. Okay, so I got a snare, a hi-hat. Now it's time to find a kick drum. Cool, so I'll drag this guy in here. And this is just a 4 on the floor kick. But now I can break it up and use it whatever way I want. So I got hi-hats, snares, and a kick. Let's create a real basic beat with this. So off screen, I created a kick and snare pattern, just real basic. I like using the step sequencer for this because if it slices up the loop, it'll actually display all of the slices of the loop in the step sequencer. So that's really handy, and it's a bit easier to use than working in piano roll. Except I totally messed up that snare pattern. It's a halftime pattern. So there we go. It's real simple. Okay. Let's find some hi-hats. I'm going to layer my snare in there, and then I think I'm going to use these two a lot. Let's extend this out to 32 steps. And if you want to do sort of like a trap style hi-hat, you can always turn on your note repeat here, and you can add in some additional subdivisions. The only problem here is you can't really affect the pitch very easily. If you did that, if you want to affect the pitch, you'll have to sort of load in the hi-hat on an individual quick sampler as a one-shot, and then you'll be able to pitch shift it that way. But for this video, I'm not going to worry about that too much. There we go. So we had a real basic beat. You could do this in the tracks area, or you could do it within live loops. It's completely up to you. Actually, I'll go ahead and pull this over to live loops. There we go. And then if I wanted to create another beat over here, I could just, continue on with my pattern cells here. So let's try adding something else to this. Let's add like an effect or a bass or something tonal to this. So let me go into Splice again. So that's kind of cool. I could just use it as is. It'll automatically adopt the tempo of the project. But I want to do something different with it. So instead of using it as is, I'll drag this in. I'll use the quick sampler original option. Once again, it's going to try to chop it up. I don't plan on using all of it. I just want to use some of the beginning here. And let's see what I've got here for samples. So let's do something like that. And then what I'm going to do is roll down decay time in the volume envelope here. And what this will do is it'll sort of fade the tail on each of these slices a bit. And I can also pull up the attack a little bit so it softens the front end. Let's say that I wanted this in a different key. It says it's in G minor, but let's say that I wanted it in A minor instead. I could pitch the whole thing up 2 semitones. And then you can use that in, in whatever key you want. I'll just call this synth effects, and I'll add a little bit of delay and reverb just to make more out of this. I'll go with the stereo delay here. Filter out that delay a bit. And I'll add a touch of reverb to this as well. And by a touch of reverb, I mean completely wash it in reverb. And just like before, because this was sliced up in that slicing mode, I can create a pattern cell here, open this up, and each of the slices will be shown here. And I can play back the rest of this scene here, and I can sort of improvise in the step sequencer with this synth effects idea. So let's say that I want this to be the intro. So I'll right click down here, rename this intro. We'll say this will be our first verse, right? So I'll rename this verse 1. And it's the same beat, the same synth idea, but I want a bass in here too. So remember, I'm in an A minor. So let's find something that's like a bass in here that we can use. So that's pretty cool. I could use it on its own. The problem is it's in C# minor, so I would have to transpose this down 4 semitones to put it in A minor. I don't think I want to use it that way. I think I'm going to chop it up like I've been doing. So I'll drag this into Quick Sampler. Now it's loaded this one up in classic mode because it can't really distinguish the transients. But I'll put it in slice mode and it'll attempt to. Now notice when I play the notes, the sample plays to the very end of that slice. I don't have to hold the key down. What I want is some of these long note samples. I want them to only play when I'm holding the key down. So you can do that by pressing this gate button here. Something like that. And then again, I need to transpose this up or down to A minor. So again, if I go down 4, that'll bring me down to A minor. Or we could go up 8. That's going to take us up to a new octave. It's up to you what octave you want to be in. You could even duplicate this. You could make one that's, I can call this bass up an octave, duplicate it, and make another one and call this sub bass. One can be down an octave. So I'll pull this one to -4. And where I'm getting -4 and +8 is from 12. There's 12 semitones in an octave. So if I've transposed this down 4 semitones, 1 octave higher would be 12 minus 4, which is plus 8. So that's how I'm getting that number. So I think that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go with a one that's up an octave and one that's down an octave. For this, I'm going to use just a regular old MIDI cell here and play in these notes. Now notice that the notes can only last as long as the sample itself, without looping it. And really, you're not going to be using loop unless you're in classic mode here. But there is a workaround for this. If you click right here, this will turn on flex within the quick sampler. And I can set the playback speed to half speed. What that's going to do is double the maximum length of each of these slices that I'm using. So let's pull this down to the sub-bass octave here. And this is going to be the same notes, just transposed down an octave. And you'll see here that we don't have to use the flex and follow option, because when you play this down an octave, the playback speed is lower, and so therefore each slice is going to play back slower. You might have to use this depending on what sort of samples you're working with. So in this case, for this one, I don't have to do that. Let's give this a little bit of like a sidechain ducking effect on both of my basses here. And you know what? To do this, I think I'm going to put both of these in a track stack. So I'll create track stack, summing stack. With the summing stack, you actually only have to have one MIDI region up here on the stack itself, and it'll send that MIDI to both of these other tracks. So you don't have to have it on both of those if you're using a stack. So just together, I'll just call this bass stack. And then on my stack, I'll add a compressor, and I will sidechain in the kick instrument. Here it is. And let's see if we can get a cool sidechain ducking effect on this. Okay, so the sidechain pattern, the kick pattern, is a little different than the pattern that I actually want on the bass stack. So I'm going to duplicate my kick track, and I'm going to call this sidechain SC. I'm going to mute it. Then I'll just duplicate my kick pattern down, go back into my bass stack compressor, and set this to the SC or kick SC track. And now this muted region here, this muted track, will actually affect the sidechain, not the real kick drum. Yeah, it's kind of rough to keep the, if you want that beefy sidechain pumping effect, it's kind of difficult to control the dynamics on it. I usually end up throwing like a separate limiter on this. Obviously, we're not like at the mixing stage yet, but I'll try to control my clipping the best I can here. That should work just fine for now. So I've got two scenes here. I've got an intro and a verse. In this next section, let's move everything over again, but take the synth effects out. We'll move the bass over again, but let's add something else in here. Let's do something else with this. Let's see if I can create like a, I don't know, like a synth lead or something I can arpeggiate. So let me just type in synth. Okay, so we have the C funky stab. Let's throw this in here on its own quick sampler. And because it's just a one-shot, you can choose to use it as a one-shot, or probably in this case, the better mode is classic mode. And you can also choose to loop it. So you can say loop forward. So if for some reason you use this and you want the note to be longer than the sample, it'll actually loop. And you can set a separate loop range from loop length. And you can also add a crossfade to the loop itself to soften that little pop even more. But the great thing about this is this loop was actually the note C, so it's loaded on C correctly as the correct key. So whatever I play with this, if I play in A minor, it's going to be just all white keys anyway. Now, I'm probably not going to use it like that, not like as a melodic synth. There's too much vibrato on it, but I might use it for some sort of like an arpeggiated idea. So let me just add in a new MIDI cell here. I'll open this up, and what I'll do, create like an A minor arpeggio. And then I'll duplicate this, and I'll just pull the A down to G. So it's just an A chord, an A minor chord, then an A minor 7 chord, that's all. And then instead of just playing it as is, because that's kind of boring and weird sounding, too much vibrato. Let's make this sort of like an arpeggiated idea. I'll add the arpeggiator to this. We'll go maybe up an octave, use a different variation, pull down the note length so it's kind of nice and short and staccato. And again, just using the volume envelope to shorten the decay time so I get more of a staccato sound out of each note rather than this long synth lead idea. Let's add some effects to this. Same as before. Actually, what I'll do, save on plugins. I'll create a bus, an effects send, over to bus 2. And I'll do the same thing on my synth effects here. And I'll take that delay and that space designer that I had over there, pull it over to the effects bus. I'll call this delay plus verb. I'll set the delay where it's at is fine, but then I'll set the verb to all wet with no dry. Let's see what that sounds like. Now you could also use an effects crash, something like this. I like to take these and use them in reverse. The only tricky thing if you're working in live loops is it's not very easy to reverse things in live loops. You have to sort of pull it into the tracks area, flip it around, and you can do that pretty easily just by going to your region inspector and clicking reverse. Then trim this up, whatever way you want. So I'm going to just kind of trim off some of the back end here. There we go. And then I'll make this like exactly 2 bars long, something like this. Now I'm going to kind of cheat this a little bit because really what I want is 4 bars. I want this to be 4 bars long, but I want 2 full bars of silence here. So to sort of cheat this, what I like to do is just hold Option, drag this out here, hit J to join these. It joins them together, but I'm not actually going to use both of them. I'm just going to sort of lob this off, and I'm left with a sample that's got 2 bars of silence and 2 bars of sound. And then when I drag this in here, I can click on it and turn off the loop function, and now that swell will come in at the right spot. So I can just call this swell effects. Let's see what that sounds like. You can use this as like a transition to build tension into the next section. So again, you could continue to build this out as long as you want. You could make another verse, another chorus, another instrumental section, an outro, build out a whole song. You don't have to use live loops for this. I do like using live loops because once you're done, it's fairly easy to move your arrangement over into the tracks area. You just right click and you select insert scene at playhead. And then verse 1, maybe I want a couple verse 1s, right? And then maybe I want the chorus one time. And then it'll move all of that over into the tracks area. You just click here to activate the tracks area. I can hide the live loops grid, and there we go. And you know, if you want to, you can continue to build this out and arrange it in any way you like. But the point here is that I've only used quick samplers for this beat. So I find Quick Sampler really cool for doing some more creative things with loops and samples than just using them as is. I almost never use a loop as is unless it's a real simple like shaker or something like that. Like I don't usually use loops as is. I usually find myself loading them into Quick Sampler first and then, you know, repurposing them for different rhythms and different musical ideas. So hopefully this video has helped to sort of spark your imagination and using loops and samples, using Quick Sampler and Quick Sampler's 3 different modes. All 3 of them are great modes used for different things, but that can be used together here to create a full beat or a full song. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thanks for the support and thanks for watching.